Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. OM-1, I want to say Olympus, but it's not Olympus anymore, but OM Digital Systems. So OM-1 is the hero of the day. So we will look at ergonomy and image quality, video quality, image stabilization, special features, and we will have some conclusions. So let's start right away. So ergonomically, it's one of the best cameras I've ever had in my hands, because the grip is fantastic. It's deep, but not too deep, not too shallow. It's just perfect. Your finger naturally lands on the shutter button, and you have very easy access to video button. You have very rich amount of buttons that you can customize. You have customizable button on the lens itself. Lens itself offers easy switch between manual and autofocus. You have this dial button, top dial button here, very nicely profiled and very ergonomically. It's a really great camera. You can see for yourself. So you have flippy out screen, which is kind of obvious nowadays. You have autofocus joystick. You have all the buttons you would expect from a flagship camera. So ergonomy wise, this is a totally recommended camera. And of course, you don't have a shortage of connectivity. You have HDMI port, micro HDMI port. You have USB-C, and you can charge this camera with your phone charger basically. And you have jack and a microphone microphone and headphone input. And on the left side, double SD slot, and this camera is really fast, which we will talk about right now. Speaking of which, this camera is, wait a minute, my wife is calling me. So this camera is just wonderful when it comes to speed, and speed is just one of the best on the market. I think only Nikon Z9 comes somehow close to this camera. However, speed is amazing. So you can have 120 roll frames per second, which is totally amazing. And maybe let me just show you. Okay, I just did 100 photos in slow. You cannot hear it, but so no blackout, super fast, and that works great. And just to be honest, it's not my intention to tell you about every single function you have in this camera, because that would be super boring. But I would like to pay your attention to some of the features that I find really important. First one is image quality when it comes to high resolution photos. I mentioned before that you can do handheld 50 megabytes RAW files or JPEG files, and this thing works really good, and it boosts dynamic range. So you can see for yourself that the amount of detail you find and the dynamic range of those photos are really good. So this is phenomenal, and I would say this would be one of the main reasons for me to get this camera, to use that particular mode, since I don't like to shoot too fast, too much frames. I'm more into slow photography, which is probably something not for me in that case, because this is super fast camera, but that's another story. Okay, the other thing is dynamic range. When you represent a more classic approach to photography and you want a high dynamic range, this camera does have some issues. So in shadows or in dark parts of the image, you can find a lot of noise when you boost your ISO. So you can use OM Workspace to use AI noise reduction, export it to TIFF file, and then you can work on TIFF files with reduced noise reduction, and then this camera again can shine. You have to be though very careful not to overexpose the images, because it is very easy to have blown out highlights, which is a little bit of disappointment to me. So you can see for yourself that in some cases it's just beyond fixing. However, having all that knowledge, you can make this camera to work for you. You can make it really useful. Now let's talk about video quality. First thing that I would love to mention here is image stabilization. This image stabilization has so many features here. You can basically shoot a handheld stable videos like that, and really image stabilization is great in that camera. When it comes to video quality, however, I'm not so much in love with the look of those videos. I find it a little bit digital. However, probably you can tweak it to your taste and, you know, make it look a little less digital if you find some workarounds and, you know, you set it to some specific profiles, which I didn't honestly have time to play with too much. However, straight out of the camera, like holding this camera in your hand and shooting videos 4K, you know, 60 frames per second, for example, which is great to have, by the way. You know, those images look good. However, I find still this digital look of Micro Four Thirds a little bit visible here. So something to keep in mind if you're thinking of that camera mainly as a video camera. However, video features are very rich in that camera, so again, like 4K 60 frames per second, this is something to like appreciate a lot. So to sum up, when it comes to, like I didn't mention autofocus performance. So when it comes to autofocus performance, in vlogging situation, this camera performs wonderful because like this image stabilization and face tracking works flawlessly. And by the way, focus is great because pretty much this sensor allows this camera to use whole sensor as a huge autofocus system. So this stacked and quadruple pixel, you know, sensor inside really introduces some new tech inside of that camera and makes this camera pretty amazing. And I found this camera to be very responsive. So whenever I wanted to shoot, just turn it on and it was ready for action. So you can see for yourself that I could catch moments that I would normally catch either with, I would even find it difficult with my iPhone. Just before I turn off the camera, you know, I grab my iPhone from my pocket and turn on the screen and then turn on the camera and press the shutter button. It would take longer than actually turn this guy on and have it ready for shot. So who is this camera designed for? For active people. If you want to take your camera everywhere, you don't have to be afraid. This camera is really waterproof, it's really dust-proof, it's really made for active people, for those who love sports, mountains, who like to, you know, experience cold weather, super hot weather, and it's designed to be there for you, to be ready for action. And this camera is like designed with active people in mind, and it really meets all the expectations of active photographers and videographers out there. So definitely it's a very recommended camera with those specific limitations that are known you know, in Micro Four Thirds system. However, I have to say that the tech, you know, is advancing, and this camera represents a huge value nowadays, and in many cases it's just unbeatable. When it comes to autofocus performance, it's wonderful. When it comes to speed of that camera, it's amazing. And when it comes to like detection of objects like birds and, you know, different kinds of animals, this camera is wonderful. So wildlife photography for active people, not those that are, you know, standing there and waiting in a booth, but just actively hunting for animals. I mean, photography wise, that OM-1 is really good. I hope you guys enjoyed my short review of OM-1 system, and if you did, please leave thumbs up, don't forget to subscribe, and if you have some questions regarding this camera, please don't forget to leave comments below, and I see you guys in the next one.